what we teach culturally as Western societies, we've really moved away from some key cultural values around social connections and the value of family and the value of engaging pro-socially and having meaning in your activities to a fairly capitalist-oriented, what job are you going to have and how are you going to get there and what uni are you going to go to and, what trade are you going to choose and what's your income going to be? And we've really lost sight of that broader sense of well-being and actually pursuing income as a way to support that rather than pursuing income as pursuing income.
All right, welcome to the It's Never About Money community. I'm really excited about our next guest. We have Lisa Williams, who's an associate professor, a social psychologist whose research explores how emotions shape and are shaped by social processes. Lisa's research focuses on the adaptive functions of positive social emotions such as pride and gratitude. Timely given the time frame, we're all very grateful for our families at the moment. We're heading into Christmas, even though this won't be released until in the new year, in 2024. How are you, Lisa?
I'm doing well, thanks.
All right. So I thought we might start with a little bit about why you're a social scientist and what's your personal journey. How did you get to this point?
How long do you have?
I know. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Look, early on in my academic career, I thought I was going to save the world by being an environmental lawyer, but I got into some science classes and realized that wasn't really for me. I happened into psychology by accident, happened into research by accident, kind of got invited on a whim to join a lab, and that happened to be a social psychology lab where we were asking some questions about the choices people make about actually what to buy with their money and what they thought would make them happy. And then if they change their mind once they don't get what they want. And I really got the bug for research. And so from there, it was a matter of pursuing, I pursued my PhD and I got my PhD and I decided to do that on a relatively under-researched emotion at the time, pride. And since then, since coming down to Australia for my academic position at UNSW, I've kind of expanded my focus to other positive emotions, as you mentioned, as well as well-being and happiness and the types of social dynamics that really appear to be key to making us feel like we've lived satisfied lives.
And so do you think, in doing the research around the positive emotion of pride, do you feel like your actual research itself has ironically given you a sense of pride in your own career?
Yeah, my PhD supervisor thought it was so hilarious to joke about how proud he was of me when I got my PhD. And then I had a PhD student working on an interesting version of pride, actually on vicarious pride, which is a fancy word for capturing the pride we feel in others' accomplishments.
Yes.
And then I found myself channeling my PhD supervisor when I would joke to Joel about how proud I was of him for his work on vicarious pride. So yes, it all gets a little bit circular. But look, I that work really was groundbreaking in many ways, showing some of the behavioral effects of pride that we didn't really know about. The emotion had a pretty bad rap. It is one of the 7 deadly sins, after all. A lot of people warn against feeling pride, diminish the feelings that you have and don't express it. But the experimental work I did showed that actually pride can be really important in helping us, like getting that sense of pride from accomplishing your goals can be really important in motivating future goal pursuit. And sometimes the goals we pursue are really hard. And we need that pride kick to keep us going. And I also showed that when we express that pride or when we're feeling pride around others, that we actually get some esteem from them, that others recognize that we're good at things. And if you keep it within reason, it's a pretty good emotion to have in your emotional arsenal.
So it's within the reason sort of idea, is it? There's a sort of form of healthy pride, and there can be a maladaptive kind of aspect of pride. And I think the way that I think about it is, if we are completely believing that our person is a bunch of behaviors or a bunch of achievements, it becomes very egocentric, and you can be prideful about certain achievements. And I don't know that is always entirely healthy if it's not in check. I don't know if I've explained that well enough, but if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I think one way that that's captured in research, and it aligns with my own thinking on this, is that most any emotion, if it's felt in too high intensity or too high frequency, or outside the context in which kind of it would be sensibly felt, then you're going to be in trouble, right? So if you're angry all the time, or extremely angry, or angry outside of context in which it makes sense to be angry, then anger is not such a good emotion. And you could put any emotion in there, right? Sadness, anxiety, happiness, amusement, right? Like laughing out of context is a real social faux pas. So my thinking on pride is really that there isn't some special case here where you have to be more careful than with other emotions. It's just like others. It's, keep it within reason. Tie it to the achievements that do have social value to you and those around you, and it can be a really valuable tool.
That makes sense. I'm interested, and I must admit, in reading and doing a little back reading in preparation, I do often get confused between the differences between happiness, well-being, life satisfaction, meaning. Actually, those four terms. I don't know how to bucket them. So maybe as a starting point, if we could try to distill the differences between these ones that I've just described.
Sure. So I'll share that this is my view, and there are probably researchers and other theorists out there that would disagree with what I'm going to say. But so you and I are on the same page. What I would say is that well-being is the overarching term that we'd be talking about here, and that under well-being we have an arm of well-being that has to do with what most people would call happiness. The Greek or origin word that people use for this is hedonic well-being. Some people, the word hedonics like pursuing pleasure. So there is a bit of well-being that is feeling good. And philosophers and researchers often talk about that in terms of feeling happy right now, or more broadly, feeling satisfied with your life. So just this kind of good sense of things. Now, the other big arm of well-being is less discussed. It also has a fancy Greek-oriented word. This is eudaimonic well-being.
Almost sounds eudaimonic when I wrote it, but when I read it before, but it's eudaimonic. Just to be clear, I
usually say it eudaimonic.
yeah, just to be clear.
Yeah, de-emphasizing the demonic. So eudaimonic well-being has to do with. Theorists hold that it has many parts, but really we could probably boil it down to having a sense of meaning in one's life, purpose, mastery over the things you do, autonomy, choice over what you do, and also, importantly, as a social psychologist, eudaimonic well-being also includes social well-being. So having a sense of positive relations with those around you. So if we think about those two arms of well-being, we have kind of the hedonic feeling good and eudaimonic, which if you follow the Greek back might be doing well. The argument is that both of those need to be in place for someone to be truly well. And if you have an imbalance or you pursue one at the expense of the other, you're going to be in trouble in terms of having this overall sense of well-being.
So what about this sense of meaning? Is that... Yeah, where does that sit?
Yeah, so meaning is one of the components of eudaimonic well-being, and depending on which theorist you talk to, that could be the main one or one of six.
It seems pretty important. Yeah,
it is important, and I think it's something. There's a quite prolific researcher who focuses on meaning in life in particular. who would argue that this construct, this idea, is actually really key. And that wrapped in that, you have a sense of mastery and a sense of purpose, but it's that sense of meaning.
Is that the Viktor Frankl sort of work as well? Is that?
Oh, this is more recent, but he does cite the older Frankl stuff as well. Yeah. It interestingly, that work differentiates between searching for meaning and having meaning. And I was fascinated by this research when I first read it, because basically having a perpetual search for meaning is actually detrimental. So constantly being in this state where you're searching for meaning, and then likely not finding it because you're still searching is really not good. People in that state do not report high levels of positive emotions. They report lower kind of sense of purpose and autonomy and things. But for folks who
is that something related to their expectations of what they should be looking for? Like it's almost like the meaning itself has to be so darn profound, otherwise it's not worthwhile.
Yeah. So in this research, my sense is that participants define for themselves what meaning might be, and you could dig back into that. Okay, what is driving that search for meaning? What's driving this ongoing search for meaning, and why they can't seem to satisfy it? And I think my guess, this isn't based on the research, my guess is that pretty quickly you would start to kind of cross into research on spirituality and religious belief, and cross over with the benefits of that, which I'm loosely aware of that research, but it is mixed, as you might expect. Religiosity and spirituality can be really good for well-being, and they can also be detrimental for well-being.
None of these things seem very binary to me. None of this stuff seems, this is categorical.
Researchers love to put things in categories, you see, because then we can measure them separately. But they're not as clean cut as we'd like to pretend, to be honest. But that research overall on meaning in life, kind of contrasting with that, maybe, if you will, that more problematic state of consistently searching for meaning, for folks who have the sense that they have attained meaning. It appears to unlock all sorts of benefits. They report being physically healthier and mentally healthier, and more engaged in the community and things like that. So it's not. I think that's one insightful version of dividing into categories that's actually been really useful in thinking about well-being, because there's a similar thing on research in happiness. So pursuing constantly, like really highly valuing happiness but not getting it, is really bad. And again, you could dig into why some folks appear to be constantly chasing that rather than sitting with the positive things they have. But that constant search, constant chugging at things appears to be really detrimental to us as humans.
So it seems like, well-being's the sort of umbrella term, the thing that we're all aspiring to is this sense of well-being and feeling good. Underneath that, we've got this sort of hedonic aspect to happiness, and this eudaimonic aspect, which is, so the hedonic side of it more around moment-to-moment feelings of joy, I suppose, or sort of exhilaration or elation. And then, this eudaimonic idea, which is more a sense or a feeling that there's some mastery, some achievement, some friction that we've had to go through to achieve something. That sense of purpose, that sense of meaning also sits under that. Your point, which was interesting to me, was that without you need the sort of hedonic side there. You need to have a balance between both. And I have, this might be an insight into my own psyche, but I've been constantly feeling that the sort of hedonic side is the side to be more cautious about and worried about. And it's the eudaimonic side that you want to be in, where you're feeling this friction, this cost of doing something that you know is worthwhile, but that with time there'll be a sense of satisfaction. And in some way, the eudaimonic side will actually give you some sort of hedonic pleasure at some point in time in the future, whereas the reverse doesn't seem as true. So
Well, your intuitions are spot on.
okay,
I mean,
great.
I think generally balance is the answer with most theories. You pursue physical fitness at the expense of mental fitness, and that's going to be a problem. I think we see a similar thing here. Um, Really fascinating research has looked at and teased apart actually the kind of timeline of different bits of well-being. So does if we go with the fancy names here, does hedonic well-being predict eudaimonic well-being over time? Or does eudaimonic well-being predict hedonic well-being? So basically, does being happy give you meaning, or does having meaning give you happiness?
Mm,
And the second appears to receive the most support. So it's not
mm,
that it's never the case that
mm,
experiencing positive emotions can build eudaimonic well-being over time.
mm,
But the most robust relationship is that having meaning and purpose and autonomy over
mm,
time
mm,
gives rise to positive emotions. And the thoughts on that are that having eudaimonic well-being puts you in contexts, social contexts, work
mm,
contexts, free time contexts that actually give rise to positive emotions. So it may not be direct that you're sitting there with your sense of purpose and meaning and you're feeling happy about it, but more that it shifts the way you live your life in such a way that you happen to experience more positive emotions. And then when you're trying to do that summative judgment, am I satisfied with my life? That your answer is more often yes than no. So
mm.
your intuition is right that kind of chasing that treadmill towards positive emotion, eating the ice cream and watching the movies and doing all the stuff that makes us all feel good. It has its place, but if you do that, if you chase that as a way for overall well-being, um,
Mm,
it's not as likely to succeed than if
mhm.
you chase those goals that are sometimes harder to get, that do require effort, that doing the thing that gives you purpose and meaning is sometimes in the moment really hard. And that idea really was the type of ideas that initially spurred my initial work on pride. I was actually
Mm.
chatting with my PhD supervisor. I was a rower in undergraduate university, and rowing is like the quintessential terrible right now for maybe a possible future good. Like you're waking up. I was up at 4:45 a.m. at uni to go and row in the rain in Oregon. Like it's just
There's no, there's
relentless.
no, there's no hedonic pleasure
Not
going
a
on there,
lot.
right? Yeah.
But, long term, you get these rewards of being in this lovely teamwork setting. This is kind of aside from all the competitions and the winning, which may or may not happen, but kind of the long term benefit of the beauty of rowing gracefully
Mm,
and
mm.
being a part of a team. It really makes those harder moments worthwhile. And what might push that? It might be this sense of pride in doing that.
I love this idea that just comes to me. I don't know if it's true, but it feels like pride is more likely to be a positive emotion that is felt off the back of eudaimonic endeavors
Yeah.
than I can't think of other than vicarious pride, where you might feel the pride of a child doing
Mm.
something that you mastered a lot later than them or something like that. That might be an immediate gratification, sort of a hedonic sort of pride that you might feel. But the sort of pride that you explain in the rowing comes as a result of a friction or a
Yeah.
cost of doing something so regularly for the pursuit of a greater good.
Yeah.
And then you look at it over time and you go, well, wow, what have I achieved? It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And look, the definition that we pinned on pride in that early work, where you kind of have to define all your terms when you're setting out new ground. So we had to pick a definition of pride. And really what we landed on is that it's an emotion that we feel when we've achieved something in a socially valued domain. Um, and really, achieve is doing a lot of work there. So by achievement, we don't mean like you happen to luckily, you're not proud of winning the lottery. But you're proud of doing work that has led to a goal that you have attained that mattered to you and mattered to those around you. And so I think you're right that there is some alignment there um, between the types of things that we do that give us a sense of pride and the types of things that we do that give us a sense of eudaimonic well-being, which is purpose and mastery and meaning.
So can we perhaps, before we move on to some of the eudaimonic side, which I think is, for me, it's a pretty interesting aspect of what we pursue, but can we maybe give our listeners a little bit more of an idea about when sort of hedonistic endeavors are actually adaptive and helpful, and where they can be, because they do feel a little bit like they're the sugar rush. They're the white bread we've talked to you about before, not the sustainable stuff. It feels a bit like you're always chasing that if that's what you're going down. So how do we kind of bring these things into our lives without having them out of balance?
Yeah, look, the way I would probably answer that best is to say my view of our emotional state, including the positive emotions that might be called hedonic well-being, as well as negative emotions, is that they're a pretty good gauge of how we are in relation to our environment. And so if you take negative emotions, just for an example, I know the question isn't about this, so bear with
That's
me.
okay. No, I'm good with you.
So
Good.
yeah,
Yep.
so negative emotions like, in the moment you're feeling a bit sad or a bit frustrated or angry, that those are really important states, and they actually inform us on how we're doing and what we should do next. So this is really kind of emotions as internal information idea. Our positive emotions do the same, right? So when we are feeling happy in the moment, amused, enthusiastic, these are all indicators that we're in a good environment. And at a really basic level, like a moment to moment level, it's not at all to say we should avoid negative things at all times, but generally taking ourselves from an environment that is not great to one that is better, where we're feeling positive and happy on a net basis, is going to be a good thing. So in the moment, choosing to move from an environment that might be making you frustrated or upset to one that makes you feel relatively more calm and relaxed is probably going to be a good thing. And if you call that chasing hedonic well-being, then I think that's a totally fair take. Like, that's a great time. Like, choose to move from interacting with person A, who might be not great for you, to interacting with person B, who is. That's an adaptive choice. It makes sense for our well-being. And so I think in that view, kind of taking our emotions as inputs to how we're going would lead us to be periodically making choices to improve our happiness, to improve the kind of net feeling that we're feeling good or positive.
And that happiness
about where
has that happiness has a satisfaction side to it. Is because, like, the quality of happiness, or this is the thing, like, I think, does someone who takes some sort of drug that gives them some sort of feeling of elation, that might give them a momentary feeling of a high, but is that actually necessarily adaptive for them afterwards? And do they feel happy about it afterwards? It's kind of that sort of thing.
So, yeah. So when you add long-term outcomes, things get
Murky.
notably more complicated, right?
Yes, cool.
So
yeah, we don't have to necessarily go there, Lisa, but I just, my mind is just whirring on these things.
It's a great example because, look, you say drugs that give you a sense of euphoria. For someone else, that's, and this is not pinning any negativity against anyone.
No.
For some people, that's having a serve of ice cream after dinner. For some people, that's choosing to hang out with their friends rather than, doing the extra thing for their boss that they were asked to do. Like, we make lots of choices given behavior A or behavior B. We often choose the hedonic choice. Now, in the moment, that might lead us to feel happier. Now, long term, you ask tomorrow, next week, in a year, has that decision eroded our physical well-being, our relationships with others, our ability to earn for our family, and things get really complicated. So all I'll say is, like, there's probably not a formula you could apply. right?
Mm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
all a balance. I do think, kind of talking about tipping points, for a second, moving back to eudaimonic well-being, I think that there's probably a tipping point of pursuing eudaimonic well-being to too strong in extent. So if you take someone who has chosen that their purpose in life is
Talk to me,
to
Lisa. Talk to me.
that their purpose in life is to help others strip all of their material assets and go and dedicate
Yep.
themselves. Okay, so that's a really noble purpose, and that could give
Mm.
them a lot of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But that might come at the expense of their personal relationships with their family or their romantic
Mm.
partner. It could come
Mm.
at it could be a grueling life that really comes at the expense of moment to moment happiness, that there
Oh, that's
actually
super
isn't a lot of
interesting.
positivity there.
So it's this idea that the people that really game change in life, often there's a massive cost to them. I think of, like, I know this is a really strange example, but like I've listened to podcasts about Prince, the artist,
Okay.
and he was an incredible musician, like just an absolute incredible musician, and dedicated his whole life to music. He was a social recluse, and he found it really hard to have any friends.
Yeah.
And I just sometimes think that, people's choices around meaning and their purpose about what they're delivering to the world at large can also have this kind of byproduct or this cost. And I think that's what you're sort of illustrating.
Yeah. So, and it, before when I said, look, there's a stronger relationship between pursuing eudaimonic well-being leads to happiness. I just, there is a boundary condition of that where doing something at the true expense of other aspects of our well-being. And so I guess one thing is to say that overarching umbrella I set out really is to do with psychological or mental well-being. We also have physical well-being that we do need to take in account. So, folks who pursue
Money.
athletic money is a good example. Topical. I was going to say physical goals like
Sure.
being ultra marathon runners and things.
Mm.
That's great. They can do that actually at the expense of their physical well-being over time. So there are boundary effects all over psychology, and I think well-being is just this minefield of trying to hit the balance without stepping too far. But returning to money, I think chasing money is another minefield.
Yeah, it is. We'll get to that, I think. I just wondered whether, I've talked ad nauseum. I feel like a little bit of a parrot, but it's worthwhile just expressing again the purpose of this podcast is to sort of bring forward the idea that spending time on the accumulation, looking to accumulate money for the sake of it itself, can lead to distortions in your life around relationships, family, spiritual growth, community and the connections that we can have and feeling as part of a broader community, our own physical health. I wondered where this idea of eudaimonic and hedonic traits or drivers actually works within this idea. So like, if we're looking at work as an example, what are some aspects of work or a career that are more about eudaimonic, and what sort of choices would we make that might be more hedonic? And just going through it a little bit so that, we put some make something tangible about this conversation.
Yeah. So, look, it's tricky. I will say for myself, I feel incredibly fortunate to be paid to do something that actually gives me a great deal of meaning and purpose and happiness. And I am, the building I'm in is actually off-white. I'm literally in an ivory tower, but I recognize that not everyone gets to enjoy that. And I study gratitude, so I say this without irony. I'm very grateful for my position in that in life currently. But I do think work and career is this interesting place where a lot of people feel that there's a trade-off that the jobs that might give them meaning and purpose and autonomy, right, the choice of how they spend their workday, are not those that pay the best. And that especially at upper career ladder stages where you're kind of making those choices, do I take this promotion or do I move organizations for a higher pay, but I'll have increased accountability to what have you, a board or a boss who I may not like, then making those choices becomes really tricky. And the reason why that's tricky is that it's not all about your work day, whether that's 9 to 5 or some other schedule or more than 35 hours a week. It's really the money that you earn at work can often afford you literally to do things in your non-work time that are really valuable. So it's not just about pursuing work that may give you meaning. Sometimes it's necessary to take jobs that may not give you meaning, but then it allows you
to find meaning outside of work.
Yeah. It's, and that's why I kind of say it's a bit of a balance, right? And
but isn't that the beauty of it? That I mean,
the beauty and the challenge, maybe.
Yeah. But regardless of the financial side, you can try to make it work, whether it be at work with a lower paid job and you make ends meet the other way around, or if you choose the money, you have a greater capacity potentially to find the meaning outside of the career, potentially.
I think so I think there's a lot of weight in that, because I think based on my understanding, there's decreasing gains in happiness with increasing income. So you kind of get on this metaphorical treadmill of kind of chasing the next raise, chasing the next, that'll allow my next vacation, but then you're working so hard you don't take your next vacation. You're trying to get the money to get your family into maybe home ownership, and you think that this will unlock a different lifestyle and different things, but then you move house and you still have your really demanding job that doesn't allow you to actually enjoy those things. So potentially is key there. And I think that those are choices that some people make well, but it is a bit of a trap that is easy to fall into, the allure of more income. There's some great recent research out of Australia. It piggybacks on.
Is that the Hilda stuff that was?
Yeah. So there's this original work back in the US from Nobel Prize winner, incidentally, Daniel Kahneman, on kind of the happiness gains that you get from increasing income.
Yes.
And there's a fairly linear increase. So more income or more access to money coincides with higher happiness. I'm being careful about using causal language here because this data is almost never causal. But with more money comes more happiness, but only to a point. And then that relationship tapers off. And way back when that work was originally done, that point was around, I think, 74 or 75,000 US. And
of income per year.
Annual income. And most people don't earn that.
No.
So there is some room, right? Some people think, oh, okay, well, I'll earn more and I could get more happiness. And that's true to a point. But once you get to that point, earning more seems like it'll give you more happiness, but it doesn't. It has diminishing returns.
Adaptation theory I was reading about, which is this idea that it was just like, it just what you thought was giving you a certain amount of happiness, you require a little bit more to give you that same amount of happiness. And it's just
There's similar ideas floating around in kind of substance addiction, right? So at first it doesn't take very much to give you a good high, and then you need
it's
more
like a dopamine
more.
thing.
Okay. So they did, Richard Morris, who's an Australian researcher, did some analysis of the HILDA data set. I can't remember what HILDA stands for, but it's a household labor dynamics.
Income, labor.
Sure.
I don't know.
There's an I in there.
I'm sure.
A. anyway, so this is a huge data set, longitudinal data set over many years, and
Yeah.
they did a similar analysis as the original, and what they found is that adjusting for Australian dollar, of course, there was the point at which there were no more returns on happiness had this certain point, but that it has increased a lot over
Yes.
time. So across 20 years, now that point where the diminishing happiness happens is higher. And you could see that as a good thing, right? That becomes a carrot to chase. So like, oh, okay, we have more
Not
room to get more happiness.
not if median incomes aren't increasing in line, right?
Exactly. So the kind of sad bit of that data is that what that means is that more and more and more Australians are below the kind of ideal kind of inflection peak of happiness. And there are lots of economic reasons for that, but I think it shifts the dynamics of well-being and happiness. Another thing that research showed was that overall levels of well-being, however it's measured in Hilda, had been declining over the past 10, or I guess it would be now 15 years. And maybe it has to do with labor and economic dynamics. As a social psychologist, I might also point to some fairly substantial shifts in how we interact with other people that could be driving those declines as well.
But don't you think, I'm using complete instinct here, and I could be completely wrong, but don't you think that part of the reason there's a lack of satisfaction is because we're within a system that is trying to meet these sort of ideals and standards, and we had our first conversation right at the start about what gives us pleasure and what gives us a sense of pride and what we should be grateful for, and have we lost a little bit of our way in this society, of those key fundamentals that perhaps the ancients and our elders used to have a little bit more involved in their lives? Have we missed something? Is that why people are just not satisfied as much?
I mean, I think there's an argument to be made there. So I'll bring in some research that I'm across on loneliness as a bit of a answer there. Tangential, but I think it is related. So loneliness has been increasing over time. We have key groups where loneliness is peaking, maybe not surprisingly amongst the elderly. So as you age, you retire, you lose your social networks from work around whatever, 60, 65. And then your social network literally gets smaller over time as your peers pass away. So loneliness in the elderly has been ongoing and is a problem. It is increasing over time due to the way our society is set up, where often elderly are isolated rather than embedded in their families.
Yes.
But another key age where we're seeing longitudinal increases in loneliness is amongst early and mid-adolescents. So these are folks who are at school. They're embedded in social networks all the time by design of what society is telling them they need to do with their day, yet they're reporting increased loneliness and isolation, this sense of having their social needs not met. And there are a lot of reasons. There are some prominent researchers who kind of pin it all on smartphones and social networks. I'm not fully convinced by that data, to be honest. I don't think that that's the demon that it's made out to be. I think there are certainly cases where social media use is negative for well-being and can increase loneliness. But I don't think that's all of the story. And my inclination, to get to your question, is that in many ways, what we teach culturally as Western societies, so I'm American, we're talking here in Australia, we've really moved away from some key cultural values around social connections and the value of family and the value of engaging pro-socially and having meaning in your activities to a fairly capitalist-oriented, what job are you going to have and how are you going to get there and what uni are you going to go to and what trade are you going to choose and what's your income going to be? And we've really lost sight of that broader sense of well-being and actually pursuing income as a way to support that. rather than pursuing income as pursuing income. That's my personal sense.
So might our needs actually be lower than what we think they are if we actually focused on not buying the things, but perhaps having the experiences? Because one of the conversations I wanted to have with you was this research around the fact that when we're looking at our consumption, what we actually spend on is very, very important to support our sense of well-being.
Yeah.
And it might be that our beliefs about how much we need to sustain ourselves is based upon a model which is flawed inherently if we're looking at maximizing our well-being, in the sense of like buying all these things that we have been suggested that we need is actually not bringing about a greater level of utility. But the research is saying it's the experiences that we're having. And I don't know that it always comes at such a cost. So I just wanted you to perhaps...
Yeah, so there's some really interesting work out of some social psychologists who were intrigued on kind of how we spend our money, and how in a fairly consumer-driven, ad-driven society, when handed an extra $10 or $50, many of us will go and buy a thing with it, thinking that it'll make us happy. It turns out it often doesn't. It may have a short life. So like, in the moment, there's kind of the thrill of buying something special for yourself. But in light of that data, the researchers started to chase, well, maybe we could instruct people, rather than buying a thing for themselves, to buy a thing for someone else. So simply shifting the focus, same material thing, buy it for someone else. They found higher levels of positive emotion to result from that, and more sustained positive emotion. And as you might expect, a stronger social connection with the person you bought it for. So
because you bought them.
Well, perhaps. We're talking just before Christmas, so this is all very relevant. But
it is.
Look, there's a whole separate kind of psychology of gift giving literature that this is only touching on. But the more intriguing next step of that research was to say, okay, what if it's not buying things, but buying experiences, and specifically buying experiences that you can share with someone. So it is almost Christmas, which many people in Australia choose to buy presents for other people, rather than buying the new tech gadget or, whatever, yet another tie or t-shirt. Maybe instead of buying the thing for someone, you could buy an experience that you share with them. So tickets to go to the movies, or a date night IOU, or a vacation if that's in your budget, those types of shared experiences. And it turns out when you compare purchases for other people of the same financial value that is a material thing versus an experiential thing that can be shared, the best outcomes come from that experiential thing that can be shared. The slightly selfish take of that is, of course, if you buy someone an experience that you get to share with them, you get to benefit from the experience too. So it's a little bit of a selfish present. But I think we're all good.
I like it, to be honest. I'm taking this on. I like it. It sounds good to me.
You can say, a researcher told me so.
Exactly. So,
to a broader point, rather than those specific studies, I think how we spend our money is really important. And it takes a conscious decision, especially this time of year, but actually all year round. We are bombarded with, our telcos reach out and want us to get the newest phone, and it's this or that, or the newest clothes, and advertising is everywhere. And the belief of all of that is you will look beautiful. You will be happy if you buy this thing. This next thing is going to make your life so much better. But it turns out it often doesn't. And if you took that same amount of money and said, hang on, pause, I'm not going to spend it on the thing. I'm going to choose an experience that I can share with someone, or at the very least, buy a gift for someone. Chances are the well-being utility, if you want to put it that way, the well-being utility of that will be higher.
So do you get a sense that going back to the original point about the income issue, we've got, median incomes not actually keeping pace with the rising kind of watermark or threshold for income and happiness. Do you get a sense that you can have a moderate and modest budget and still be able to have a meaningful and happy existence? I mean, I know there's a level, right? I know there's a level.
Yeah. So there's, going way back in psychology, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Sufficient, safe housing, access to food. I think if we're talking about well-being rather than simply kind of existing at a minimum, having enough money to choose to do things with your time, whatever that means. So even local travel or taking your family to lunch or something. Minimal extra income to spend would still enable and maybe be advantageous to enabling us to choose how to spend our time for meaning and purpose, over and above just having a lot of money to choose what to do with. Because I think, as I've mentioned, our society pushes us to do things with that money that probably aren't going to gain our well-being at all. I'm pretty conscious about my family's financial spend and kind of whether it will actually have well-being benefit rather than just kind of satisfying a need. And I'll sit on a purchase sometimes for so long that we don't need it anymore. And I do that purposefully because I think it's really easy to get caught up in that. Now, I also think it's important to note that many people support extended families or adoptive families. And so the income you're earning is really not really money that you're doing anything with. And there's no problem in that. Supporting other people can actually give a big sense of purpose and meaning in your life if you're doing that by choice. So it's sometimes not as simple as it makes it seem when you boil down the research findings. But I do think there is an allure of living with less that research would probably support to a point, right? So if your basic needs are met and you have some degree of autonomy and freedom over your free time, and you to meet those basic needs, you're not working excessively to earn that income, that a very eudaimonically happy life can result. And that maybe it's easier to do that than if you were at top income bracket and swimming in maybe too much choice for what to do with your money.
It's not to say that people can't be in positions of having extraordinary levels of wealth and income, but it's just the perspective around, is all of that required at the coalface and the choices that we make? Yeah.
And if you have an abundance of income and assets, then maybe you could choose to make some decisions about how to spread that or spend that or invest that in such a way that gives you eudaimonic well-being. It just means that has to be maybe a bit more intentionally done. So we think of some of the most wealthy people on earth right now. Many of them are known for engaging really philanthropically, and I think that they get their sense of meaning and purpose from that rather than having money, right? But having that wealth is actually enabling families like the Gates to do intentional good around the world on the things that they choose.
Isn't it giving us a signal that those that are actually at that point are actually getting more out of their life by giving back? And it's almost like those that are clearly not, like all other mere mortals, don't have the resources, and yet surely there is a more appropriate way that we can all give back to the community, regardless of our financial circumstances, whether it be through our time picking up the phone and speaking to someone, all of those types of things, because there's clearly a benefit if we're seeing it at the top end of town with Bill Gates' foundation. It's a clear signal, isn't it?
I mean, I don't even know what Bill Gates net
I
worth
don't
is,
either.
but
I don't.
it's a
I
lot.
don't know. It's a lot, right? Yeah.
We'll say
Yep.
gazillions. Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you don't need gazillions to be engaging in those activities that give purpose. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the most important messages on well-being is, everyday acts can bring you around to having a sense of meaning and purpose. And waiting until you have enough stuff, money, assets to make some of those choices, to invest in your social relationships and invest in activities of purpose and meaning, may find you at a later age than you want to be. So that's the one word of warning, I think, out of well-being research is to sit with the choices that you're making now and make sure that they're fulfilling your needs.
I'm going to ask this question, and I've got one of the answers because the Hilda survey answered something, and I thought, oh my goodness. The question was, what activities can we undertake to bring about more meaning, and why does more meaning help us, right? So that was the question. And in the research, it shows that the people that had more than 4 children had a greater sense of life satisfaction. Yet my brother's got 3.
Oh, man.
And wow. And I kind of thought the idea is that they always say that they just couldn't live without them, yet they're really challenging. And it's this idea of embracing the friction, right? It's the cost associated with something meaningful again. And I suppose that there ain't no greater cost and there ain't no greater meaning than having children, but it shows up in the research, right?
It does.
I wouldn't know. I'm still a child, but yeah.
Yeah. So look, there's great research on the impact of parenthood, and overall, what you see is this kind of immediate dip, like it's really hard, and then kids get into school and it becomes a bit less hard, and around that time, you find parents saying things like, I could not imagine my life without children, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And they give me such a sense of meaning and purpose, and that I never knew I'd have, right? That just unlocked this new closet that is eternally giving. And look, time and time again, we see that in research. Now, I don't know about the particular number. Overall, it seems like parenthood in general has this immediate dip, but long-term benefit. So we're back to kind of the pride question, I guess. Things that are hard work can have long-term benefit. Parenting is one of them. says the mother to an almost 4-year-old. I'm waiting for school.
So
just kidding.
So do you think, like, giving the community a little bit of if you had 3 or 4 points that you would give the community around how they could structure, what are the fundamentals and how they could structure their lives to bring about a greater level of well-being?
Yeah. So for me, absolutely number 1 would be investing in social relationships.
Yes.
I think all of us could spend more time and more effort connecting with our friends, our family, if we still have them.
Not through social media.
Well, maybe. I mean,
maybe?
look, if it works, for you, like I have folks who I only really chat with on Facebook Messenger or whatever. Okay. Especially once you get to like having friends who are other parents, it's almost all asynchronous conversation.
Sure.
Fit in when you can. But any connection is super valuable. Face-to-face is great, but I've relocated internationally and that's not possible with a lot of my friends. So that to me is the number 1, is to be more intentional about social relationships, build that, choose to spend time with people that give you positive meaning and happiness.
So if we can reflect on just that point, Lisa, before we go to the next point, because I think it's important. I think one of the biggest things that becomes almost forgotten is this connection with others that we really truly care about and we think about, yet we're constantly working or we're so busy in our own lives. And I think if we are caught up in the treadmill, the financial treadmill of, I need this amount of money to actually be happy and well and all of that, and then we forget about this central point, which is the case for so many. Like, it's just so many. They've excluded themselves from their social networks because they're just so incredibly busy. And I think your first point is, and I don't know what the other ones are, but it's just so pertinent.
I'm not even really sure I have other ones. Like, I could just drop it at one point, to be honest.
Well, it's a really good one, but like I love it because I think about myself. Like I think about myself when I'm at my most busy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about others, but I'm not necessarily going out and connecting with them, and especially the ones that they've been there for so long, and I know that I get a certain amount of pleasure and unconditional love from them.
Yeah.
You know,
and they will be there for you unconditionally, even
Correct.
if a week or 6 months or a year goes by.
Correct. So you just don't attend to it.
Yeah, look, it's a blessing and a curse to have connections like that, I think.
Yeah.
I just think there's so much research pointing to the benefits of social relationships that really that's probably the key to it all. You know, if you can find a way to pursue the things that give you momentary happiness or purpose while connecting with other people, the better. Same research on physical fitness. So like, if you want to pursue some physical fitness goals, do it with someone else. It's even better, right? You get the social connection and your physical goals are more likely to be met. And it's just time and time again, I see research pointing to the importance of intentionally really engaging with those around us. And the other bit of research I'll add is it doesn't have to be super close. You know, not everyone has the privilege of having close relationships with more than a small handful of people. More recent research has highlighted the benefits of what we call weak ties, or just basically chatting with strangers. And while we as humans generally say we don't want to do it, and we think that it won't be fun and that other people will judge us, if we actually force ourselves into conversations with strangers on the bus, or, you know, the barista serving your coffee, just a little bit of chit chat, we actually experience pretty substantial gains in well-being.
Wow.
Yeah, there's this great...
So small talk's good. How's this weather?
Yeah. Yeah, small talk with strangers. Now, small talk with your colleagues, I'm not going to comment on. But yeah, this great researcher, Gillian Sandstrom, she has this great hashtag, talking with strangers. I hope she's kept it up in the upheaval of social media. But she did this research, this really foundational research on the importance of weak ties and chatting with strangers. And she tells all these fantastic stories about the people who she chats with incidentally, you know, on a hike or waiting at the bus stop or whatever. And it's really shifted the way I chat with people. You find most people are open to it if you just open up the line of conversation.
I think that's amazing. And it dovetails into, I mean, you know, doing things experientially with family. I'm going on a trip overseas, and for the first time in a long time, my mother's coming along with us.
Ooh,
and she doesn't usually get out with us, but now she's going to, and I'm loving the research. I'm also loving the idea that, you know, when you go to, you know, your local gym and you just have a chat to somebody before the session, you know, it has some utility. It has some value.
It really does. And I think the more we recognize the way for us that social relationships and well-being are intertwined, the more we can be intentional about it. You know, folks vary in how introverted and extroverted they are, but it turns out social connections matter for everybody. It's just the amount and style of connection that differs. But everybody needs someone to talk to in some sense. And I think that the digital age has brought us a great array of ways we can do that and make it work for you. Like, I'm not to judge whether someone gets benefit from Zoom chats over face-to-face. It's, you know, if you're happy, you're happy. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well, I really feel like I'm regretting having to wrap this up because I think we said in our pre-discussion that you know, we're going to have a little bit to talk about. I could keep going.
I reckon we could chat for another couple hours.
we could do another part in the future, maybe. But
maybe we should.
We should, yeah. Look, it's been great because again, I have these sort of instincts and feelings about how certain things affect me, and listening to my clients, and I make statements. I'm very happy for people to write in and say, look, I don't believe you're correct. But this is why I've invited you on, so that we could have a discussion about what the evidence is showing. And I'm better for it, and I'm sure the community is. So I really appreciate it. But
it's truly been my pleasure. It's been great fun, and I hope you and your listeners have gained some insights. Look, this research is so rich. We've really only scratched the surface onto some of these topics, but the core ideas are there.
Now, every guest of ours so far has had to answer this question.
Oh, no.
What is your spirit animal and why? And every time I usually just put in a little bit of extra chit chat so they have a little time to think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's whatever came to mind first.
Okay. I'll go with a sea turtle. A sea turtle, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I grew up in Hawaii. We did a lot of volunteering to help protect the hawksbill sea turtles in Hawaii, and ensure that their nests were safe and that the baby honu, or the baby sea turtles, made it out to sea. So I feel a big connection to sea turtles. And when I'm home, we do kind of distance swimming in the ocean, and it's just always so great to see the kind of natural communities of them thriving. So
they're doing well then.
I mean, as well as can be.
As well as they can be. Given the humans and what they do. Yeah.
The hawksbill numbers are very low, but there is one or two off the coast where we swim on Maui, and it's always super exciting to see the hawksbills out there. But tons of greens. There's a lot to see.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you very much, and at the time of recording, it's a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you as well, Lisa.
Happy holidays, and have a great trip.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Take care of yourself.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.